Washington wanting a third potential first-round pick. And because of that, we've discussed the Sixers, 85% right now is how we feel that they would be looking to move that 16th overall pick. So as a result, we just kind of went over some names, but we landed on Kyle Kuzma. Your thoughts? Kyle Kuzma.
I guess I'll start off with the good of Kyle Kuzma. He's on a reasonable contract, on a... What is? I should have that right up in front of me. It's like right around 21 million.
It's a decline. Here, I had the numbers.
25 million, or the 23 million this upcoming year, then 21.4, 19.4. The contract is reasonable. Yeah. He's being paid role player money, which I think is reasonable.
And he's in his prime years, most notably on that contract.
I just don't like the basketball player.
Fair enough. See, this is where we go.
He's talented, sure. And Kyle will bring up that back during his Lakers career, he filled a role more capably than maybe over the last couple of years.
Me.
We talked about it before the show. I'm putting words in your mouth. You literally said it. And there's some validity to that. I sat here before the show and watched a whole lot of his shot decision-making. And the argument is maybe he will revert back to how he played with the Lakers when he's surrounded by more talent. There's a chance that happens. But there's also a chance that he has become so enamored with being a featured player. And I'm just sitting there and watching. And one thing I brought up, first of all, he's never really been a great catch-and-shoot player. He's had various seasons, even unguarded catch-and-shoot shots. He's generally below league average, which isn't great. Like in a role player, you want them to be able to knock those down consistently. He's had a year or two here and there where he's been above league average. For the most part, he's been like the 35th, the 40th percentile, which isn't really good enough. And again, those are on unguarded catch-and-shoot shots. But man, this dude loves the 30% dribble jumper more than anyone I've ever... Not anyone, but he likes it way too much. And we're talking about trying to slot in a player in a role alongside Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And clearly, this wouldn't be like the Sixers' number one option. This isn't who they're targeting. I don't think it would be close to the number one option. But the problem is, if the premise is the Wizards want to make a move to get a pick at this draft, Sixers aren't going to be in a position to do that, because if we're talking about option like, I don't even think we're talking about option like C, D, E, or F. We're talking like option like M. If the Sixers are going to have to get to that point, they're going to have to go through the start of free agency before they come to that conclusion. It's going to be after the draft. It's going to be after when Washington is looking to make this deal. I don't necessarily see a match between these two teams. And quite frankly, like I said, outside of the contract, I just don't like the player. I think he's, like I said, I'm putting a lot, especially over the last couple of years, I'm putting a lot of value in decision-making and reliable decision-making and reliable shooting, and that's just not Kyle Kuzma.
So, as Derek pointed out and stole my thunder, the big question for me is, well, it's two-pronged. Which version of Kyle Kuzma are you getting? But more pertinently, what version of Kyle Kuzma does Kyle Kuzma want to be? When he came into the league, he joined a Lakers team that at first he got to stretch his wings a little bit, but as you know, LeBron comes to town and then it becomes the LeBron James show, as every team that he's ever played for does, he then becomes a complimentary role player rather than, oh, this is one of the faces of the franchise, one of the featured players. And as Kuzma transitioned into that sort of role, there was real buy-in, and you could see, how he could be part of a winning team, a winning culture, right? Like, as Derek said, the shooting numbers have never been as good as they've needed to be. Even his rookie season, and I believe his fourth season, were his best years shooting, and even they were 36%, about 36.5% from three overall. That's barely above average. You would take it on the volume that he's offering you, because he's taken 6+ threes a game for most of his career, which is good volume for a role player. But more importantly, you're getting that. You're getting the closeout ability. You're getting a guy who can, if necessary, go down to the mid-post, hunt some matchups, do some things with the face-up game, things like that. More importantly to me, on the other side of the ball, I think he is a good and tough defender against the bigger wing types. Like, if you need to beat the Bostons of the world to get to a finals or even get to a conference finals. We got to, take our baby steps here in Philadelphia. I think he's somebody who can at least match up in size and physicality with Tatum and Brown. Now, I would call him something close to like the Millionaires version of Kelly Oubre in that way, where a lot of the same problems exist, right? Like the off-ball attentiveness, the awareness, those problems were not as bad in LA, are now glaring in Washington. And you could say he's on a bad team, but part of the reason the team is bad is that he is being asked to be a featured player for them. And Devon brought up close to the open of the show that he mentioned the trade that didn't happen. So for anybody who doesn't know, the reporting was out there that Dallas tried to trade for Kuzma before they traded for PJ Washington. And Kuzma gave a direct quote about it after the deadline and essentially said he was approached by Washington's president of basketball ops, and the decision was left to him whether he wanted to go to Dallas or stay in Washington. And Kuzma told Washington's president directly he wanted to stay and continue to build something. What that suggests is that Kyle Kuzma right now is content being the man or something close to the man in Washington. And so if you're a GM like Morey or somebody leading a contending hopeful team, you see that and say, well, this guy is not coming here wanting to be LA Kyle Kuzma. He wants to be blonde hair, drip cam, take 20 shots a game, take a bunch of contested mid-range jumpers type of player. That's not going to get it done. And if you're talking about, as Derek said, that's fallback option, let's call it G or H or somewhere in that territory, that would push him even further down. But we're only discussing Kyle Kuzma if everything else goes to shit, right? If you know that Paul George is staying in LA, if you know LeBron is staying in LA or going to Cleveland or somewhere that doesn't involve you, if Pat Riley is saying, give us 4 first-round picks for Jimmy Butler or get the hell out of my face. Like, you go down the list, it's just that Kuzma is going to be available. And I know there's been a lot of chatter about, well, the Sixers should try to get role players and get a few good role players, high-end guys, rather than chasing a star and looking for younger players. So to me, this is what that looks like, right? Like, he's an imperfect player, but he's on a pretty good contract. He's right in the years that you need to be at 29, 30, 31 in order to try to help Joel and Tyrese win now. But there's a lot of downside because for example, if you put him and Kelly Oubre on the floor at the same time, I think Joel will probably have more gray hairs after that season than he did coming into it.
Him and me both.
So the guys have laid out everything about Kyle Kuzma at this point of his career. We already know who he is. The question is, which one are you going to get? You know both sides because we've seen it, winning a championship with LA and then going to Washington, signing that extension and staying with that dreaded franchise right now instead of going to a situation where he might be playing that PJ Washington role currently for the Dallas Mavericks in the second round of the playoffs. What is his, where's he mentally? What does he want to do? And right now, it just seems like that's what he wants to do, be able to take as many shots as he wants, along with Jordan Poole, get a little frustrated from time to time, but all eyes are on them, win or lose, because that's what he's done. He's got his money, he's won his championship, and at this point, he is still the face of the franchise. Even with the number 2 overall pick, everything is still going to run through Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole for this upcoming season, at least for right now. Is he willing to, though, take that step back, look himself in the mirror at the age of 27, 28, and look at a situation like Philadelphia and see an opportunity where winning again is important to him, playing that third role behind Embiid and Maxey. And right now, I just don't think that's where he is. I haven't focused a lot on Washington except for when we had a little fun during the season because they were awful. They stunk. And it was real, and he was a big part of that. Now, his numbers look good at averaging 22 and 6 on the season, But what did that do? It did nothing. And if he's willing to accept that instead of going to a situation like Dallas to play with Luka, and I'm not saying that Luka Doncic is the easiest person to play with, because we also saw an opportunity where Jalen Brunson left the situation as probably the number 2 behind Luka Doncic in Dallas to go to New York, where you didn't know it was going to turn to this, but he had enough belief that it was going to be a much better, a more stable situation than what Washington currently is right now, firing their head coach. All of the turmoil going on in the front office, moving from Washington potentially to Virginia, all of those things, yet he's still willing.
I keep forgetting about all that.
He's still willing to stay there.
Yeah,
so that's the uncomfortable part when speaking about him outside of the negative parts on the floor, where he wants to shoot a lot of mid-range shots. And is he going to decide, I got to squeeze off because I'm not getting enough shots here because Maxey and Embiid are doing too much here? When is my turn? When is enough going to be enough for me? Is that his thinking out there on the basketball floor? So that's the difficult spot with him. Kyle Kuzma in a updated role now coming to Philadelphia lead to winning if he's willing to accept the situation that's in front of him with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey being the faces.
If he's
of
willing
the
to
franchise.
accept it, I think absolutely. Like, it's not a perfect skill set, and we do it. There's some people like Brandon in the chat, for example, says we'll be complaining about Kuzma the same way we complain about Tobias.
No,
I do not
he'll be
agree with
aggressive,
that.
yeah.
He is very much he is more in the Kelly school of he will stand out sometimes in a loud and aggressive way because he does not have that little voice in the back of Tobias's head that tells him no and, hey, don't take that shot and step out of an open three. Like, that does not exist for Kyle Kuzma. And I do think there's upside to that, right? Like, he's someone that in a big game, the ball's going to swing to him. If he's 0 for, I say it all the time with Kelly, he might be 0 for 7. He might have missed a bunch of shots in a row. He will take the shot. But how you feel about him taking that shot in that moment is going to be based on whether he makes it or not. He doesn't approach it that way. I do like the level of fearlessness that he plays with. And as I said, like I think the positive with him compared to some guys, I talk about this a lot, right? Like the situations dictate how guys play, how they think and all that. And trying to project how, for example, like a Zach LaVine or a Bradley Beal, some of these guys we talked about last year, whether they want to come and be about the right things and defend and all that. At least in Kyle Kuzma's case, we have documented proof that in the right situation, he will do the things that add up to winning. Like it's not the same as some of these other guys who have been career losers who, are gunning for shots, gunning for their stats and just care about the contract. And because he is locked in on, around, I think the average over the next few years is like $21 million, right? Because he is locked in on that, he doesn't necessarily have to go out and think about, okay, I got to hit this number and do this and do that to get my next deal. If he were to come here and be, whether it's the third option, fourth option, depending on how the roster shakes out, if he is just the high-end version of himself, the guy who will defend top players, knock down some open shots, be a good secondary option in backup units, whether that's next to Joel, whether that's as a guy next to Tyrese Maxey, he'll still only be, I believe, 31 when the next contract comes. He can get a good role player contract like the one he's on now. Again, like I firmly believe that those types of players are valued a lot. Like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a good example. He's making $15+ million. The odds are he's going to opt out after this season. He's slightly older than Kuzma, and he's going to get probably 20 to 25 million per over, let's say, the next few years. So there is a path for him coming, whether it's here or a place like Philadelphia, buying into that role and being a helpful piece and making himself long-term money. It's just hard to know if he wants to. And based on what he said following the non-trade to Dallas, it does sort of seem like because he won early, because he was able to, he got his championship early, now he kind of wants to spread his wings and see what he can be as a 1 or a 2 on a different sort of team. And that's not to say he's wrong. Like, he wants to see what he can do as a building block of the team, but that complicates things for somebody like or a team like the Sixers who need him to play a very different role.
We all city like the mayor.